So this video will be about the impact of buzzwords and what a buzzword is and what it means. And I'm gonna present a way for you to a method for you to structure your communication and your buzzwords and what it actually means, so you can think about it yourselves and even develop your own methodology on how you want to communicate. And this is going to be based upon examples from CSGO, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, but it can be applied to everything. So let's start off with a quote from Frantz Fanon, who was a influential person in the fields of post-colonial studies, critical theory, and Marxism. So the quote is, "To speak a language is to take on a world, a culture." So what he means by this is when you learn a different language than your own, you take on the culture that language imposes. So you take on a completely different world. You get a new worldview of you get information that you hadn't known before because you've grown up in this little bubble that is your country and your language and your cultural heritage. And then when you differ from that and learn a new language, you have to learn a new set of values and new set of cultural like what is okay to do and what is not okay to do in different cultures, the rules of it. Yes, so let's talk about buzzwords. Well, what is a buzzword? Well, a buzzword is something that is used so much that it kind of loses its meaning. So if we take an example from Counter-Strike, you can say, well, if players say they have bad communication, well, then communication is a buzzword because there's many layers to communication. There's how you, like, first of all, the system that you have structured is like, how is that set up? Do you work within those rules of that system, or have you not set up a system and do you just expect everyone to be able to have this good communication? But then again, what is good communication, right? In terms of Counter-Strike, it would mean to be clear and concise and be very fast to very like clear to pronounce or to say whatever it is you see, right? And then you take initiative based upon that, right? And these are some of the fundamental rules of Counter-Strike. Now, if you take the communication, for example, you can layer it into 4 different categories, as far as I can see it. So there's the freeze time, right? And I've made a video prior about this. It's gonna be in the description so you can see it and how you structure it. And what you have to think about when you talk about freeze time, right, is are you as the in-game leader, mostly this is, so are you clear and concise when you call? So whatever you call, is it clear? Does everyone understand it? And then when you get deeper into the games and you have some reads on how the CT side is playing, right? And you want to make a call based on a read that you have not practiced beforehand as a strat. Do your players understand that read when you call throughout the entire 15 seconds of the freeze time, and like you tell them exactly what they need to do? Do they understand your meaning, like what it is you want to achieve with this call? Do they understand why this is a good thing? Do they understand if this is like if like do they trust your call even? Like, and then do you rely on practiced strats in your freeze time? So in every single round you play you play default A, right? And then whenever you do default A, you do the exact same thing every single time, right? And then you call that 15 times in a row, which and you do the same thing every time. This is a very, very common thing to do, that you have these both defaults and strats that you have labeled a name. Let's call it default A for the sake of argument. Now if you do default A and you do that 15 times in a row, right? Then the CT side is going to notice your tendencies and notice what it is you are doing every time. So if you rely on these practice strats, can your players and even yourself, can you think for yourself and know when it's right to deviate from it? Because if you do the same thing every single time, right, it's super easy to counter because there's so many variables when it comes to Counter-Strike. When, like, there's no perfect round, there's no perfect strategy, which is one of the beautiful things about the game, right? Okay, well then, and of course, this is more elaborated, and there's a clear methodology that I have presented in that prior video. I'm gonna again link it in the description. Now then, it comes to early round. Well, early round communication, right? Is how is that? Like, do you what is your rules here? Is your rules that you have to be quiet and only let the in-game leader talk? Are you allowing everyone to contribute? So, but what are the downsides of that? Well, the downsides are that the players on the TeamSpeak will have a harder time listening to the in-game sound because there's so much communications flowing around while they have to focus on the crosshair on the screen and all the in-game sounds they are listening for, right? So, do you have a mix of it? How does that work? Can everyone contribute to, okay, let's, can everyone take initiative and say, okay, we do this because they did that. And then maybe it's not the in-game leader who calls it. Well, do you still do it, right? These are some factors that you have to consider when talking about early round and also mid-round for that matter of fact. Are you always and then when it comes to mid-round, are you always highlighting the information? Like, oh, this is the B player, or this is the guy who lurks outside monster, he died. So they have a default towards A. You know, that's something the B players on Overpass could say on the CT side, right? Or even if you kill the Auber in middle and say, okay, we killed the Auber, you know, highlight that info, right? Are you tracking this? Are you tracking who is the Auber, who's not the Auber, who's the lurker, who's the entry guy? And then when you come to mid round, is it only the in-game leader talking, or are everyone contributing to how you're gonna play the mid round? Do you have Do you everyone contribute to the mid round by telling like, okay, well, they used 2 smokes on A, so there's no more smokes on A. And they have no mollies since they used them as well because you counted it, right? So A is free to hit, right? Do you highlight this information? And this can be applied onto the late round as well. So onto the late round, you say, okay, well, how do we want to go into this side? Where should we end up? And that's based on this information, right? And then when you talk about executes, right? Oh, well, does everyone have the grenades for the execute? Are people having to hold back on the utility when taking map control because they have this utility that they have to throw their different nade sets to do it? Or can everyone throw everyone's nade sets? Are you communicating it early, saying, okay, we have this map control, we cannot do strat A because I do not have a smoke, right? Does your player say that? And do you make some kind of notion and like, do you adapt to that information and change it, you know, work towards it? How is it you adapt to this information that you get, right? So another buzzword is arrogance. This is talked a lot about with players' mentality. So arrogance is normally a really bad thing. It's considered a super bad thing because arrogance is like, okay, player A thinks he's better than everyone, or even just player A thinks he's better than player B, where then player A will belittle him and do not trust either the call or whatever it is they want to do together, right? Now, arrogance can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. So a notorious thing that happened in a famous example was Kadian, who played in the Danish CSGO scene for a long, long time. And then suddenly, because he was considered arrogant and toxic, we're going to come into toxic later, then no one in the Danish scene wanted to play with him, right? So he had to move to America and do well at a major play-in and get Rogue, his former team, into a major before he could get picked up by North back in 2018, and then he moved on, and now he's in Heroic, who's the second best Danish team. So he had to fight and reinvent himself as a person before people and show results before people Danish people mainly, wanted to play with him again on Danish teams. And afterwards, he's been invited onto the Danish television who covers Counter-Strike, and he's been on many desks. He was even on desks, in analyst desks, while being considered toxic and arrogant. So, that's like the bad side of it, right? Now, the good side of it is the arrogance that's the people like Simple and Saivu, Nico, you name it, the biggest players, what they have, because they have this arrogance that they think they are better than the opponents, right? And they think, okay, every single angle, I'm peeking him because I'm better than him, so I'm gonna win this fight. And then they peek it with full confidence, and this is arrogance as well, because he thinks he's gonna shoot him out, and then you can win the round based on that, right? So this is something, again, this is a very good thing about arrogance. So it's not always like it's not always just this black dark bad thing, right? There's many layers to arrogance, and you have to not just label them arrogant or toxic and then just have them give that title forever. You always have to give your own word, your own impression of it, and then explain in depth, well, how are they arrogant? How are they toxic? And then explain that to people. Instead of, if I ask someone about a player and he says, oh, that player is arrogant. And it's like, okay, well, then I don't want to play with him, right? Because his definition of arrogant might be another definition than what you have, right? Because arrogant is such a used word that the meaning of it is kind of lost, again, as the notion of this video and buzzwords. So think about the factors of what you think arrogance is, and then talk about it and have a discussion about it. Well, how is he arrogant? Why is he? What makes him arrogant? And then let's go on to toxic. So something that's used very, very much is, oh, this guy's toxic. Well, what does toxic even mean? Like, does it mean that he's flaming his teammates every single round? Does it mean that he's not trying to win? I mean, what is it exactly toxic means? Again, this comes back to arrogance. It means something for you, and it means something different for me, right? And then talk about, well, what is toxicity? Well, toxicity is just being flaming, and being super mad, either in game or being aggressive towards your teammates and saying how, like, belittling them and saying how they're not good and stuff like that, right? Well, the thing is, toxicity can also be a positive thing, even though it sounds super weird, right? But if you are the player, the in-game leader, who maybe not even the in-game leader, maybe the star player, whatever, you're a player, you are contributing most of the work to a team, and you're the one, searching out pracs and scheduling matches and, presenting new things for practice every single time, and structuring the practices and stuff. If you take some of these roles and then you feel like maybe your team is not putting in the same amount of work as you are, well, then being toxic does not. It's like him wanting it even more, the first guy, right? And then the second guy is kind of taking all of that work for granted, and that makes him angry because he feels like he's not putting in enough work for the team to grow. And in that sense, toxicity, like, this can come out in a toxic way even if it's not intended to, and that's not ideal. But it's a way where toxicity is not this weird, like, super negative thing, because you can always, like, you can look at it on of the work ethic and how they are toxic, right? Are they toxic towards a teammate who has 20 hours the past 2 weeks and don't only show up for practice and leave straight after, or is he super toxic towards the guy who's really trying and giving it his best, going 100 hours the last 2 weeks, but just can't hit the shots or forgets the strategies, or whatever the case is? Well, then you can talk about, well, how are you toxic? Well, he's toxic in this way and this way and this way. Okay, well, what about this way? Have a discussion about it. Now, when it comes to mentality as well, another, like, normal buzzword is mentality is, oh, then players will say, well, I have a bad mentality. Okay, well, what does that mean? What is a bad mentality? Well, well, then there's like factors. Then they use the buzzwords again, like, well, I'm like, how does he have a bad mentality? Well, he's arrogant and he's toxic. Okay. Then look at all the variables that I just listed up, and look at, okay, well, what is this? Like, what on what level is he arrogant? On what level is he toxic? On what level is your mentality bad? Right? Are you bad at receiving information? Are you bad at taking criticism? Are you bad at being at receiving criticism, or are you bad at learning? Are you like, do you not believe in your in-game leader? Do you not believe in the project you're playing in? And then if that is the case, even this is actually shown, this can be seen in how their work ethic is. So if you have 4 players who's super dedicated, and then you have a 5th guy who's not dedicated and doesn't really, contribute to the social factors and contribute to you improving as a team, well, then probably he doesn't have the right mentality to be on this team. This is another factor of how mentality can impact teams and impact people working together. So you have to take these factors into account, and then you have to talk about expectations, and then you have to align them. Well, what is it the goal is for this team, right? And then you work out a mentality that everyone is going to have. So, well, is your mentality that, or your expectations, right? Well, are your expectations that you're going to get? Are you going to go pro in a year? Let's say that's the expectations, right? In a year, you're gonna get signed. You're gonna get salaries, and you want to live off of those salaries. Okay. Well, how? Then talk about how do you get there? What is it you need to do? What is it you think you need to do? Talk about other people. What do they think they like? What do you think is you have to check off and do every single day to become professional? And then align yourself. Everyone has to align themselves with these expectations, and then develop a mentality from that. So, well, if the expectation is to have 80 hours every 2 weeks, well, then look at your teammates' hours every 2 weeks, and look, okay, well, do they have 80 hours? And then look, and then a common, like an easy way to fake that is to just have AFK hours, right? Then look at, like, ask them, like, is this AFK hours or real hours? I mean, you can even see it when you scroll through your friends list, right, and see when they're in game. And if it's just AFK hours, then you can make the argument for, well, okay, so you're just taking the easy road. You're not going to put in the work and do what is asked of you, which we talked about when we did the expectations, right? So, like, again, like when we go to if we go to criticism, this is something that's also really often used in mentality. Well, when it comes to criticism, well, it's not only about if you're good or bad at receiving criticism or giving criticism. It's also how you give criticism. Like, what is your tone of voice? How are you giving it to them? I mean, are you talking to them like they're a 10-year-old, or are you just going full ham, going like super aggressive and talking like almost yelling at them, saying, this is too bad, you have to fix this and this and this, and I want to see results? Like, what are your expectations of the receiver, and what is the expectations of the receiver from the guy who gives the criticism, right? So there's a lot of variables and a lot of questions that needs to be answered before you can talk about all of these buzzwords. And this is just like a small part of it. So I just wanted to do it real quick and just highlight some of all of these things, right? And then apply this to anything else you think that might be buzzwords, and ask these questions, and then have conversations about it and discuss it in your teams, so you can so you can talk about it and align all of the expectations that you want to do, and how this entire team is supposed to work, and then you can move forward from there, and then always update your expectations. Oh yeah, and in the end, Finally here, I have made a community Discord. So if you want a place to discuss Counter-Strike or League of Legends or sports or anything in a good forum, the link is also in the description. And thank you for watching.